Hey, everybody. So today should hopefully be a pretty straightforward way for us to get started with our next topic of study. So this next unit, what we're going to start to take a look at is instead of studying only one variable at a time, we're going to start to look at multiple variables. Now, all of our data from our last unit we were able to represent our single variable worth of data on histograms, on box plots, and those sorts of things, where really everything was just kind of measured along the x-axis, and then if there was any second axis like on a histogram, it was always frequency that just described how commonly or how frequently something occurred. Today's big focus is going to be more instead working with multiple variables. So what you can see here on this document is a collection of different sets of data, and each of these different sets of data have two variables. So here on this first one, for example, we have 10 days recorded, we have the low temp, and the number of hot cereals that were sold. So whenever you want to represent this data, since it has two attributes, we're going to want to represent that on a coordinate plane instead of just an x-axis like we had before. Because now we're going to have a horizontal axis, which would represent, in this case, like your low temperature, and a vertical axis that would represent the number of hot cereal sales. So every point that we end up plotting in here would have both that attribute of temperature and also an attribute that would describe the number of cereals that are sold. So altogether, you should have a collection of 10 points, but each point would have those different attributes. So for today, what I want you to look at is just spend a little bit of time and for each of these four data sets, create and label your axes and make sure that you scale your axes so you can plot all of the data points. Okay. And then, like it says here on most of these problems, also it asks you to simply describe the relationship that you see present in the graph of all of your points. Okay, so I'm not going to give you a whole lot more than that right now. I want you just to kind of give a good, honest description of what do you observe happening. What sort of a pattern do you see holding? And as after we go through all of these plots, we'll start to look at what are some specific things that we need to speak to. Because, like we've seen in many other earlier units in the course, there are some specific things you want to make sure that we address. But today is really about just making sure that we can accurately create scatter plots and that we can observe kind of patterns that are going on with them. Okay. And what you'll see on most of these is the problems are going to also ask you to identify the location of medians or just do a little bit of reflection on your graph. So make sure today as you go through, start by creating your plots, then respond to the couple of questions that are given at the end of each of those plots. It shouldn't be anything too tough, but this will provide us a really good starting foundation. So tomorrow we can start to look at calculating ways of describing these two variable relationships.